You've probably walked past a mushroom this week without a second thought. On a lawn, at the base of a tree, maybe even on your dinner plate. Most of us never stop to ask what separates the ones that are perfectly fine to eat from the ones that could put you in a hospital or worse. That line is thinner and stranger than you'd expect. So let's start with the ones you need to know how to spot before we get to the ones you can actually enjoy. The death cap is responsible for roughly 9 out of every 10 fatal mushroom poisonings on the planet. It's not rare, and it's not hard to stumble across. It looks unremarkable, with an olive green to yellowish cap and white gills, no strong smell, no bitter taste. Nothing about biting into it warns you that anything is wrong. Half a cap is enough to kill a healthy adult. Its toxin blocks the enzyme your liver cells need to build proteins, and the timeline is what makes it so brutal. Symptoms show up 6 to 24 hours after eating. Then, and this is the part that gets people, they stop. For a day or two, victims genuinely feel like they're recovering. That false recovery is the toxin quietly finishing off the liver in the background. Roman Emperor Claudius is believed to have been poisoned with it in 54 AD. 2,000 years later, in 2023, an Australian woman was convicted of murdering 3 of her husband's relatives using death caps hidden in a beef Wellington. Same mushroom, same outcome, 2 millennia apart. And it's not even the only one that wears that disguise. The destroying angel. If the death cap has a twin, this is it. The destroying angel is pure white, top to bottom, which somehow makes it look cleaner and more trustworthy than its green-tinted relative. A psychological trick that's cost people their lives. It contains the exact same amatoxins, attacks the liver and kidneys the same way, and there's still no antidote. Here's the detail that makes it especially cruel. Young destroying angels start out enclosed in a white egg-like sac underground before pushing up through the soil. At that early stage, they look almost identical to puffballs, a genuinely edible mushroom. The only reliable way to tell them apart is to cut one in half. A puffball is solid white all the way through. A destroying angel reveals the outline of a developing mushroom cap forming inside, like a tiny ghost of what it's about to become. And the destroying angel isn't even the smallest, most forgettable killer on this list. That title belongs to something growing on a rotting log nearby, autumn skullcap and Galerina. Both the autumn skullcap and its close relative Galerina marginata grow on decaying wood. The same habitat as genuinely edible species like honey mushrooms, and they carry the exact same amatoxins found in the death cap. They're small, brown, and completely unremarkable, which is precisely the problem. Nobody expects the boring mushroom on the log to be the deadly one. Galerina has been documented growing in the same cluster on the same log as edible honey mushrooms, meaning a forager can harvest what looks like a clean batch and unknowingly mix in a lethal dose. A tragic case in Poland involved a family who gathered what they believed were safe wood mushrooms, cooked a meal together, and lost multiple family members to the same pot. At least that mushroom kills you quickly enough for someone to make the connection. The next one waits weeks before it even lets you know something is wrong. Webcaps. Some mushrooms don't even give you the courtesy of getting sick fast. The deadly webcap and its relatives contain a toxin called orellanine that can take 2 to 3 weeks to produce any symptoms at all. By the time nausea or kidney trouble shows up, most people have completely forgotten what they even ate. In 1950s Poland, over 100 people got sick from webcap mushrooms, several fatally, before anyone connected the dots. A Swedish mycologist named Carl Adam Nylander accidentally poisoned himself and his own family with a related species after a foraging trip, mice identifying it as something safe. A case that took years to fully unravel and became one of the most studied mushroom poisonings in European medical history. Some people have needed kidney transplants without ever learning the actual cause. As unsettling as a delayed poison is, at least it's honest about being dangerous the whole time. This next one actually rewards you for eating it wrong, right up until it doesn't. False Morel. The false Morel earned its name because it fools people looking for the real thing, a genuinely prized delicacy we'll get to shortly. It has a wrinkled, brain-like reddish-brown cap that's just similar enough to convince foragers they've hit the jackpot. Its toxin, gyrometrin, converts inside the human body into a compound also used in rocket fuel, destroying red blood cells and causing liver failure. Here's the part that keeps this mushroom dangerous. The toxin partially breaks down during cooking, which means some people have eaten it for years without dying, and quietly assumed that meant it was safe when prepared correctly. It isn't. Fatalities have occurred even after thorough cooking. A mushroom that sometimes lets you get away with it is arguably more dangerous than one that never does. And speaking of mushrooms that get mistaken for something valuable, there's one hunting for a much more expensive lookalike. Amanita Smithiana, where there's a mushroom worth a small fortune, there's a dangerous lookalike waiting nearby. Amanita Smithiana grows in the Pacific Northwest and has been mistaken more than once for matsutake, a mushroom so prized that foragers chasing it sometimes move too fast to be careful. Unlike the amatoxin mushrooms already covered, this one targets the kidneys specifically, and the damage has sometimes been permanent, requiring dialysis. It's proof that the danger of foraging isn't always about spotting some rare exotic threat. Sometimes it's just economic pressure making people careless at exactly the wrong moment. Not every dangerous mushroom is trying to poison you through your stomach, though. One on this list does it almost through spectacle: jack-o'-lantern mushroom. Picture a mushroom that glows faintly green in the dark. That's not folklore. Under the right conditions, the gills of the jack-o'-lantern mushroom genuinely emit a soft bioluminescent light at night. Despite how strange that sounds, it's regularly mistaken for chanterelles, one of the most prized edible mushrooms on Earth. Both grow near trees, both show up orange or golden, both appear in similar seasons. Eating one won't kill a healthy adult, but the experience is described as violently miserable. Severe vomiting, cramping, and diarrhea starting within hours. If a mushroom bizarre enough to glow in the dark can still fool experienced foragers standing right next to it in daylight, color and shape alone, we're never going to cut it as an identification method. And if you want proof that danger doesn't require rarity at all, you don't even have to leave your own backyard. Chlorophyllum Molybdites. If you want the mushroom most likely to actually poison someone in North America, it's not any of the exotic ones on this list. It's this one, and it's probably growing in a lawn near you right now. Chlorophyllum Molybdites shows up in yards, parks, and golf courses across the southern US and looks almost identical to the edible giant white parasol mushroom. The giveaway is the gills, which turn green as the mushroom matures. But younger specimens still have white gills, making early identification genuinely difficult. It's rarely fatal, but the gastrointestinal symptoms hit hard and fast enough that poison control centers field cases about it all summer long, disproportionately involving kids who find it growing in the backyard. Which raises the obvious question: if this many mushrooms are actively trying to hurt you, how does anyone trust the ones sitting in a grocery store bin? As it turns out, that trust has its own strange history. The grocery store trick. Walk into any supermarket and look at the mushroom section. Button mushrooms, cremini, portobello. 3 separate products, 3 separate price tags. Here's the twist. They're the exact same species, just harvested at different ages. The button is picked young and small, while it's still white. Leave it a few more days and the cap browns into a cremini. Leave that alone even longer and it stretches out into the wide, thick portobello. In the 1980s, American shoppers wanted small, clean white mushrooms and had zero interest in the big, overgrown brown ones farmers couldn't sell. So someone gave the mature mushroom an Italian-sounding name, marketed it as a steak substitute, and by the 90s it was on every menu in the country at triple the price, despite being the same fungus that was being discarded a decade earlier. You've been paying 3 different prices for one mushroom your whole life. It's a clever trick, but it's nothing compared to the amount of patience one of its cousins actually demands: Shiitake. Shiitake has the oldest documented cultivation record of any mushroom on this list, tracing back to Song Dynasty China in 1209 AD, when a farmer named Wu Sangkang noticed shiitake grew faster on logs that had been cut or damaged. He started deliberately scoring hardwood logs to encourage it, and the technique spread to Japan, where growers refined it into an art, pressing spores into notched logs and leaving them in shaded forest for up to 2 years before the first harvest. That patience is exactly why specialty-grown shiitake still commands premium prices today, even next to the fast, bag-grown versions filling grocery shelves. Shiitake now makes up roughly a quarter of all mushroom production worldwide, and a compound inside it called lentinane is approved in Japan as a supportive treatment alongside certain cancer therapies. One farmer's observation about broken logs turned into a global industry. Its cousin, on the other hand, owes its entire existence to a war nobody wanted to fight: oyster mushroom. The oyster mushroom's origin story starts in Germany during World War I, and the reason is grim. A British naval blockade had cut the country off from food imports, civilians were surviving on turnips, and soldiers were on near-starvation rations. German scientists needed a fast, reliable source of edible protein, and oyster mushrooms were the answer. They'll grow on sawdust, straw, cardboard, even coffee grounds, going from nothing to harvest in about 3 weeks. That wartime desperation shaped what the oyster mushroom became, one of the most aggressive, low-maintenance fungi in the world, now commercially grown in more than 60 countries. It also happens to contain lovastatin, the same class of cholesterol-lowering compound used in prescription statins, a detail absolutely nobody was thinking about in 1915, a famine survival food accidentally turned into a supplement aisle staple. Not every safe mushroom's danger comes from a toxin, though. One on this list is only ever hurt you through the way it's grown: Enoki. Enoki mushrooms and the long, thin, pale bundles common in hot pots and cold Korean side dishes are completely non-toxic. And yet, between 2020 and 2022, they were still linked to multiple deaths and dozens of hospitalizations across the US through repeated listeria outbreaks that triggered more than 20 FDA recalls. The reason comes down to how they're grown. Enoki are cultivated at near-freezing temperatures to get that signature long, thin shape. And that's also the exact environment listeria thrives in. FDA testing on imported Enoki found contamination in close to a fifth of all samples checked between 2020 and 2023. Cooking kills listeria completely, so Enoki in a hot soup is fine. The real risk is eating it raw or barely warmed, exactly how it traditionally appears in certain cold dishes. Meaning, the danger here isn't the mushroom itself, it's the recipe. If Enoki proves a safe mushroom can still hurt you, the next one proves a rare one is worth chasing anyway. Morel. Every morel on a restaurant menu was pulled out of a forest by someone who knows exactly which patches to check and isn't telling. Morels form underground partnerships with specific tree roots, elm, ash, and oak, bonds that take years to develop naturally and have resisted nearly every attempt at commercial farming. 2 cultivation processes have been patented in the US. Neither has produced a consistently reliable harvest at scale. That's why morels still run $30 to $60 a pound in a good season, climbing higher whenever drought hits the wild harvest. Good foraging spots get passed down through families for generations, sometimes never written down anywhere. As guarded as that secrecy is, it's nothing compared to what happens when a mushroom becomes not just rare, but nearly gone. Matsutake. Matsutake has been part of Japanese cuisine since at least the 7th century, showing up in the Manyoshu, one of the oldest food records on Earth. It was given as a seasonal gift among aristocracy, treated as the flavor of a specific moment in autumn, rather than an everyday ingredient. Today, it's listed as endangered. Japan's domestic harvest has collapsed to under 1,000 tons a year, largely because an invasive pinewood nematode, a worm that hitched a ride from North America, has been destroying the red pine forests matsutake depends on. Like the morel, it forms an underground bond with tree roots that takes years to develop in wild soil, which means it can't currently be farmed. At the season's first auction in Kyoto, a single kilogram has sold for over $100,000. A mushroom people once gathered casually off the forest floor is now one of the most expensive foods on the planet by weight. And it's not even the strangest mushroom currently making headlines.